All right, so we have covered the last couple of weeks the issue of the Epstein investigation, and particularly what is the very clear and, to a lot of people in the MAGA movement, very disturbing conflict between the very adamant, definitive, authoritative accusations that not MAGA influencers, but the people who are now at the helm of the FBI, like Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, and the head of the Justice Department, including Pam Bondi, and Trump's own personal lawyer, who's now the U.S. attorney for New Jersey, Alina Habba, and J.D. Vance as well, Donald Trump Jr., who constantly spent years accusing the Biden administration of concealing the client list of Jeffrey Epstein's to protect powerful predators and pedophiles like Bill Gates and Bill Clinton and others whom they named. Also, that they know that Jeffrey Epstein didn't commit suicide and that the evidence of that is also being hidden. They vowed once they got in to release not just the client list, but all the other files, as well as the proof that he didn't commit suicide. And lo and behold, we're just 5 months into the administration. And they're not saying, Jed, we haven't found anything yet. They're saying, we saw everything. There's nothing here. There's no client list. There's no incriminating information. There was never any blackmail. And we know for sure that he killed himself. The exact opposite of everything that they've been saying for many years. Not speculating, but actually saying. The one question they haven't answered is whether he worked with or foreign intelligence agencies, which we'll get to in a second. But I'm just kind of wondering what you make of what is obviously a very disturbing issue to watch people do a 180 as soon as they get into power, but also what you think the enduring reaction of MAGA and Trump supporters will be.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an example of what actually happens when the dog catches the car, right? For years, we were told, mostly by Republicans, but I think people beyond that had interest in this case, that there was a gigantic cover-up around Jeffrey Epstein, around not only his client list, but also potentially other very powerful people who are in and around his orbit. It was kind of insinuated or implied that a lot of them were Democrats, and that's why President Biden had not aggressively pursued this and made disclosures around the case. And then I think the dog kind of caught the car when Trump took power again. I think there was a heavy expectation on him to do a full disclosure here. We did see earlier this year that there were, some right-wing influencers like Lives of TikTok, Chaya, and some other folks who were given binders about Epstein, but the binders were full of redactions. There really wasn't anything particularly new in them, right?
And so also every document in the binder was already publicly available. They were part of the lawsuits and what was disclosed. Not a single document that hadn't been publicly disclosed.
Exactly. Yeah, and so and then I don't remember where it was. It might have been on Rogan's show where Kash Patel went on Rogan's show earlier this year. It was on some podcast. It was Theo Von Rogan, one of those shows. And he said that, to the best of his knowledge, Epstein did commit suicide. And basically the public facts that were admitted and exposed are the correct ones. And I think that was kind of the first crest, right, of the online base looking at this and saying, wait, what are you talking about? Your exact cohort of people told us for years that you suspect there's a gigantic cover up. And then if given power, you would actually do something about it, right? And then you would help, turn the narrative on its head and actually expose what happened. Could even go as far as Epstein having not killed himself. Maybe they were in a conspiracy to kill him. And then obviously seeing the complicity of a broader network of powerful people around us. We knew that Epstein was tied into all kinds of people he had met with. For instance, former Prime Minister Ehud Barak from Israel dozens of times. He actually connected Noam Chomsky with Ehud Barak. This was someone who was very well tied into not only the U.S. government figures here, but many figures overseas, including in Israel. And now we're being told there's nothing to see here, right? So it's possible that some of what the Trump administration is saying today is true, that, hey, look, Epstein did commit suicide, that there isn't some kind of broader network of people who are complicit in, child sex trafficking and so on and so forth. But then you have to ask yourself, why were these same people saying the opposite for years? Were they playing a con then, or are they playing the con now, right? And I think it's a question a lot of Trump's base, particularly his online base of people who are very interested, I think, in the Epstein files and the Epstein case. I think it is creating a real kind of discordant vibe among them, right? I think there is I don't know if you saw Alex Jones. Alex Jones has been going crazy about this topic, right?
Yeah, well, so that's kind of what I want to zero in on. I do have some substantive questions about the Epstein case that I think are worth reviewing, notwithstanding the proclamation. There's nothing to see here. It's time to move on. Trump said, how dare you talk about something so irrelevant? It's are you kidding? But the typical caricature of MAGA influencers, MAGA operatives, MAGA pundits, and journalists is that they're basically part of a cult, that Trump has built a cult of personality around him, and as a result, nobody who's associated with MAGA will ever really criticize him because as a cult is, you don't ever question or criticize the leader. And I think we've seen that caricature debunked multiple times, starting with the whole controversy over whether, as Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy won, an increased number of H-1Bs, right, which a lot of them rightfully said, what do you mean, we're going to import more foreign workers? I thought the idea was to make more jobs for Americans. You saw it a little bit with when he resumed the bombing of Yemen, although no one really cares about Yemen. We're always bombing it. No one cares that much. But you saw some, mutterings like, wait, why are we doing this? Certainly saw it with the hint that we're not going to deport people who are here illegally but working for important industries important to Trump, hotels and farms and like. Saw it with the bombing of Iran, but you're really seeing it here. So, that's a lot of pushback, a lot of dissent from a group of people who are often typically accused of being a cult who will never question Donald Trump. Wondering what you make of all that and what it says about these MAGA people.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there are certain folks kind of in the influencer network or universe who do see themselves as waking up every day and saying why whatever Trump did was a win, right? There are people like that. And there's people like that on the left, right? On the kind of the people, I think, jokingly refer to them as blue anon, Democratic influencers who do that. On the other hand, I think there's quite a few people in Trump's orbit and network who really believed in this, right? And like, you can't go after someone's core beliefs and not expect some kind of backlash, like whether it's with Donald Trump and the Republicans or the Democrats. And I think that a big part of what the Republicans kind of are facing right now is kind of an identity crisis, right? Even putting Epstein aside, like, remember QAnon, right? Like, this was a right-wing movement of people who believed that there was an elite cabal that was kind of protecting a pedophile ring, right? And it was heavily implied that the pedophiles were largely Democrats. I think a lot of people out there in the country really did expect that Trump would come in and that he would expose a lot of these big guys. He would expose a lot of the intricate conspiracies that existed throughout the Democratic Party, throughout the U.S. federal government, and they haven't seen that. Not on Epstein, but like in general, right? Like even the people maybe who chanted "lock her up" when it came to his rallies with Hillary Clinton. I mean, Trump never pursued Hillary Clinton in any serious way, and I think that faction of people is going to be somewhat disappointed. I think you may even see it have some wider impact in the political party in terms of enthusiasm for turning out for voting in the future. Because remember, Trump won't even be on the ballot anymore, right? Like, I mean, unless he does the Steve Bannon thing and somehow gets a third term, he's not going to be on the ballot in the midterms. He's not going to be on the ballot in 2028, right? Whoever's trying to take his mantle and run with his movement has to actually deliver certain things for them in order to have that cohesive coalition going forward. And I think that's a challenge for someone like J.D. Vance, who I think himself actually had some really like funny and like compelling tweets a few years ago about how, hey, we discovered this Epstein guy. He's really powerful. They say he killed himself, and then we never talked about it again, right? Like, well, now Trump is saying we shouldn't talk about it again. Now Trump is bored of the topic, right? Of course, Trump had a friendship with Epstein, even though there's no evidence that Trump was tied into these crimes. I guess what I'm saying is that in order to have a cohesive coalition and keep them together going forward, you do actually have to deliver certain things for them, right? It can't just purely be Trump's charm or charisma or his personality, particularly when he's not going to be the guy leading the coalition after a few years from now.
Yeah, J.D. Vance actually tweeted an article that he said he thinks about all the time, and he urged everybody to go read it. It was basically an article saying it's rational and reasonable for people to believe QAnon, given how blatantly our government covers up massive pedophilia rings like the Epstein case, and kind of depicted the Epstein case as being the Rosetta Stone that deciphers all of the rot and corruption of globalists. And now they're hearing, from Trump himself, scolding a journalist for even asking a question about it and saying it's time for to move on. There's no more talk about Epstein. I want to ask you, I do think that the Epstein case took on a kind of mythological sentiment that spurred a lot of unhinged conspiracy theories. You mentioned the Chomsky thing. I remember when the Wall Street Journal published on its front page top headline that Chomsky had dinner with Jeffrey Epstein a couple of times, and instantly everybody was like, oh, Chomsky was on the island and he was, having sex with 12-year-old girls as well. And that was the kind of stuff that just, and it might be up for understandable reasons, but, really got deranged, as these kind of conspiracy theories can. But there clearly are a lot of unanswered questions surrounding all of this. Like, where did Jeffrey Epstein's wealth come from? And did he have connections with the Israeli government in terms of the activities in which he was engaged, or more broadly? And one of the things that really struck me, Zed, is the reporter who provoked Trump's anger and said it's time to move on. The only question he asked was, is there any evidence that Jeffrey Epstein worked with or for foreign or intelligence or domestic intelligence agencies? To me, that's like the real substantive question. There may be others, there are others, but that's the one that really we ought to know. And after Trump scolded the journalists and say, how dare you focus and ask us about some trivial thing about some dead creep when we have all these important things to get to, Pam Bondi did actually answer it, kind of, and what she basically said was, she has no idea. She has no knowledge about whether Jeffrey Epstein is connected to any intelligence agency, and she'll get back to us. How is it remotely possible, Zed, that they purported to do an investigation, looked all in the storage rooms and under the beds and behind the, brooms and everything like they claimed, and it never once occurred to them to even wonder if Jeffrey Epstein had connections to foreign intelligence agencies, even though that was absolutely central to MAGA discourse for 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, Sagar and Jetty and Tucker Carlson recently did a podcast, and this was one of the topics that came up. And actually, their theory for why Trump maybe is not super enthusiastic about revealing all this or even being transparent about it, even if there isn't anything there, he's not very enthusiastic about it. Their theory was it's not so much that maybe Trump was involved with this island, Lolita Express, so on and so forth, but maybe that Trump is actually fearful of intelligence agencies, right? They pointed out correctly that the CIA, Mossad, so on and so forth, these intelligence agencies often have off-the-books businesses and things that they can use to, launder money, to move resources around, to get ins and out in markets and governments around the world. We know that Epstein was very friendly with the Israeli government, that I believe either his father or father-in-law had been involved in some kind of Israeli intelligence or something adjacent to that. I remember reading about that. It wouldn't surprise me if he had some kind of tie into them. And now, does that mean that he was an asset or a spy for them? I mean, I think that's something that would have to be confirmed with more evidence than we have. But there's certainly a lot of reason to suspect that he had some kind of connection or formal, or maybe even a formal connection with either Israeli or American intelligence. And that's what I think would end with someone like Trump clamming up, right? Because he wouldn't want to step on those toes, right? I think Netanyahu was actually there, around the same time that Trump was being asked this question, right? Like, this would be a very sensitive question for Netanyahu as well in terms of his country's domestic politics and their international reputation, right? And I think those sensitivities might be something that could actually spook someone like Donald Trump. It could be something that spook Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, so on and so forth, because that's something where you don't want to get on the wrong side of it, right? I think Trump got on the wrong side of a lot of the intel agencies during the first term with the Russiagate stuff, right? Like, they all suspected that he was too soft on Putin, he's too soft on Russia, and they made his life difficult in many ways, right? And I think that in my experience, Trump tends to, when he sees someone as powerful and it has the ability to hurt them, he almost respects them more, or he just kind of shies away from them some more, right? Like, he's someone who kind of sees power in that way. He doesn't necessarily rush forward to eagerly confront things like that. And I actually think that Sagar and Tucker's theory about this is possibly valid, that even if Trump doesn't know for a fact this was the case, he's not super eager to look into it because it could end up stepping on some powerful toes.
I absolutely think that is exactly what's going on here, and that's why I found it so notable that they didn't even deny. They could have denied it falsely, like they did with everything else, and nothing here. When it comes to, and they didn't do that. She was like, never thought of that. Don't have any knowledge about it. Let me look into that and get back to you. I wouldn't recommend holding your breath for her to get back to you. The Daily Caller today published in a kind of Trump critical article the mountain of evidence that connects Jeffrey Epstein to the Israeli government. He was there all the time. He toured military bases. He had access to the top officials. His primary benefactor, the source of his mysterious wealth, One of them, Les Wexner, is a hardcore Zionist with ties to the Israeli government and every major Zionist group around the world. Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, the British billionaire, was an acknowledged and admitted Mossad agent working in all kinds of ways with Israeli intelligence. So the evidence of this is substantial, no, not dispositive, but substantial enough for people to be demanding answers. And yet they've, and that was the thing that struck me is they could have just dragged it on more, and pretended that they're investigating. It was after 5 months, they just we looked, there's nothing here, we're closing this, you're not getting any other documents, move on. And that to me seemed like it was kind of a centralized order.
Yeah, and you have to remember, everyone has to remember something, is that the Department of Justice and the FBI and the federal government overall have more investigative resources and abilities at their disposal than just about anyone, right? No journalist could freely look into people's financial records, into their personal belongings, subpoena people to bring them for testimony, so on and so forth. Similar to, similar to what the federal government can do, right? So it is actually kind of shocking that they would act like they really can't do much, or like they don't want to do much after years of kind of hyping it up into something that they wanted to pursue, or something that they heavily implied the opposition party, the Democrats, were covering up for. And that there may actually be something there to where I haven't seen a whole lot of Democratic members of Congress or elected officials be opportunistic here and say, hey, you guys must be hiding something about Epstein. And, part of the reason for that is that, Bill Clinton was an Epstein friend. I think, people like Steven Pinker, Larry Summers, I feel like
Bill Gates
kind of, yeah, like the Democratic, smarty clique of people around Boston and Cambridge, right? There's a lot of them knew Epstein, right? Epstein was tied into those universities in that area. And I think that maybe Democrats have some sensitivity about this as well because of that. Maybe they would be scared that they would find something related to one of their associates. But yeah, I mean, look, it's either an all-time fake out now, or was it an all-time fake out in the years prior, to where they were implying that something was here and that they wanted to pursue it, and then they just drop it like that, right? And I don't blame people, I think, in Trump's base who are confused by it and who are asking more from the person that they elected.
Yeah, especially since they were promised this specifically. And, look, at the end of the day, if now we're supposed to believe that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and the whole crew and everything they were saying about the Epstein case was all completely untrue for all these years, despite how definitively they were asserting it, you would think then that they owe a lot of apologies to people, to the Biden officials they accused of corruptly concealing this evidence to protect powerful predators and pedophiles. They constantly implied Bill Gates was on the list and that he was one of the main reasons this list wasn't being concealed. And, also there were people in the Trump administration, not just before they got there, who were making very specific promises about things they had seen that were shocking, that were going to come out. But if now they want to insist that they're now telling the truth, they owe public apologies to a lot of people, which I'm quite certain are not going to be forthcoming. All right, let's change gears a little bit. In fact, I would almost hold my breath for Pam Bondi to get back to us on whether he has intel ties than I would for those public apologies to be forthcoming, although both are probably fatal if you were to hold your breath for either of those. All right. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.